Hi everybody, this is the 6th video in this series, the Dreamweaver tutorial series for JOU 317, and the last one, because it does involve part 7 of this large tutorial. You should have that out in front of you on paper. Part 7, there's some reading to do here, starting on page 59. First of all, we could see where we are, why don't we? By going ahead and running this. As usual, I'm going to make sure I've got my index open. I want my source code and my split view for now, probably good. Over here, my designer, I've got my responsive set up and clicked on, and I've got my all. I'm not using show set. That's all fine. If you've just been working and you're continuing, might be a good time to save all. It's probably all saved already though. And let's go ahead and preview in browser. What you should see here should be very similar to page 60, which is a somewhat squished version of it, without some of the colors, I guess, really. You get the idea, though. It's better here, easier to see on the screen. You've got, on this wide screen at least, you've got this menu that opens up and closes. There's some hover over things, too. Good. And this is what the rest of the page looks like. Links and so on in the footer. Okay, that's fine. The goal here is going to be, we have to plan how this screen, how this is going to look on different size devices. The way to deliver a different layout to larger screens, and that's going to be the key things we're doing with. We're going to use media queries. So we're going to finally start with media queries, which is a new and up-to-date piece of CSS. What we're going to do is adapt this single column layout to a two-site design suitable for tablets and desktops. And I'm on to page 60, which is just the mock-up of the thing. And then I'm on to page 61, which is about adding media queries and how we do it. So there's not that many pages left, but quite a bit to do still. And I'm going to get back to Dreamweaver here. And here we go. Media queries are described in the paragraph in the top, which you should read. We're going to create 2 of them, both based on minimum width of the screen. We can do minimum width, we can do maximum width, we can do minimum width. So we're going to, first it says drag the live view scrubber until the document window is approximately 700 pixels wide. Remember, this is the scrubber here. And we drag it, we're going to see the numbers. And we want to get down to about 700, which is pretty narrow. I'm going to go right about, I can actually get it exactly 700. How about that? Good. Then it says click this plus button here. This is that icon. I guess they don't have a name for it. It's that icon. It's the icon that looks like what that thing is. It's up just above the scrubber. A little plus in a triangle. Ruler icon on the top of the document window to open a pop-up panel where you set the media query. Okay, good. Now it's defaulting to this max width thing, but we're going to change this to min width. So at the minimum width of this, of 700, if your number wasn't exactly 700, you could put 700 in there. Okay, pixels is correct, yes. We're not going to do max width. We want to make this hook up into a responsive. Make sure that's unresponsive. Honestly, if any time through these tutorials you have seen somehow you didn't have responsive selected here or earlier, perhaps, in the CSS designer, what would have happened is it would have started putting some of the CSS in the head element, as an embedded style sheet. And you can always stop, go manually grab that stuff and go paste it in the CSS document, and that would still be okay. And then our only thing we have to do is say okay. Well, what has happened? The visual media query bar at the top of the document window now is a purple bar. See the purple one is set there? Click this bar to make the document window exact. Well, mine is exactly, but it's going to be exactly. Okay, good. It's exactly 700. In the CSS designer, make sure that all is selected here. Yes, it is. Responsive. Yes, it is. In the sources pane, expand. Oh, we can finally deal with this one. And look at, we have this min width with the purple there, which connects to the purple, I guess. Min width 700 pixels. set in there. In the CSS also, yes. And then there's an illustration of this on the next page, which should look similar to what you are also seeing on the screen at the top of page 62. We're going to click Global, okay, in the App Media pane. All the selectors that you created earlier are listed here. Okay, sorry. So in other words, this is going to apply to all selectors. These styles will be applied by all browsers regardless of screen width. You use the media query to change only those values that you want to override when the screen is at least 700 pixels wide. So in other words, global has everything, but we're going to be adding things that just apply to a minimum width of whatever. It wants us to save our work already, so let's go ahead and do that. Good. Let's see. Okay. So here we go. There's a discussion on the bottom of 62 about the real value of visual media queries. Bar becomes apparent when you're working with multiple media queries. The top row shows the max width queries as green bars. Middle row shows the min width as purple, so on. You can read through that. Clicking the appropriate bar resizes the window, allowing you to see the effects. There is online documentation about this, which I could give you. Let's not worry about it, though. Style the navigation menu for the two-column layout. The navigation menu will be displayed at all times in the two-column layout. By now, it's assumed that you know how to create selectors and style rules. They're assuming that, so these instructions will be kept brief. Make sure the document window is at least 700 pixels wide. Mine is 700 pixels wide. Click anywhere in the navigation trigger link in live view to select it. That's this guy here, right? Good. And the CSS designer makes sure the all button is selected. All, yep, okay, good. Select responsive, yep, that's right. In the sources pane and minimum width 700 in the app media pane. Selectors pane should be empty. It is empty now because we don't have any selectors that apply just to this. Remember, under global is all of our selectors. Get back here, you. It's all of our selectors, but in minimum width we have no selectors yet. Click the plus button on the selectors pane and create a selector for hashtag menu link. And I could use my arrow to change that, but I'm going to have to go over here and delete the A also. One way or the other, I just get a thing called menu link in there, like that. And set the display property to none. Well, while this is here, I have to hit enter first, of course, remember, and even twice to make it work. And now we are in the layout, and we want display, and we're setting the display property to none. So in other words, we don't want that big. We want the regular navigation at this when the minimum width is whatever, so on. So we did that. The trigger menu link disappears, right? Drag the live view scrubber to the left to make the page narrower, and the trigger link where it reappears. Ooh, does it really? Let's see. There it goes. It reappears, and then it gets wider, and it disappears. That's pretty neat, huh? Make sure the media query is still selected. It is, yes. And create a selector for hashtag nav links, not menu links. We did that before. Now it's going to be a new one. It's going to be, might as well just type this. Hashtag nav links. I can start to type and just click on it if I wish. Yes. And set the following properties and values. Again, I have to enter. It worked. And I'm going to do maximum width. So I'm in layout here. Maximum width of 1,000 pixels. Do px. Do 1,000. And position static. Position is going to be static. The position is just above the positioning thing, which is just below padding. And background color, transparent. background color is the word transparent. Okay. Changing the position property to static means that the unordered list of navigation links is no longer absolutely positioned and is displayed at its normal position within the page, forcing the rest of the page content to drop down. You can't see the links because the collapsed class has been applied dynamically via the JavaScript menu. Again, making sure the media query is selected and the selectors pane is empty, except for the ones you have created. Yes, it is, except for the ones we created. We still are unresponsive on the minimum width, so-and-so. We're down here again. We're going to create a selector for hashtag navlinks.collapsed. We're going to do hashtag, just start typing right over it, navlinks.collapsed. That is one word, no space around them. And set the opacity in layout to a 1. I have to hit the enter key. In layout, opacity is down here someplace. There it is. And it is 1. That's what we want. We want to set it at 1. And now the menu reappears. Well, it starts to anyway. There it goes. But only the this page link is visible because the background color was set to transparent in the previous step. White links on a white background are impossible to see. Thank you very much for telling us that. And we're on to page 64, number 8. Fix the links by creating, again in the media query, a selector for navlinks A. That's navlinks space A. It's a hashtag navlinks space A. Enter, and enter again if we have to. And set the following properties and values with 20%. We're going to do percent and we'll do 20. Okay, margin bottom 20 pixels. Good. Padding top 15 pixels. Oops, my margin. Yeah, my margin bottom worked very good. Now it's 15. Good. Padding bottom 15. Setting up all this navigation properly. Okay. Float left. Hey, we're finally doing a float. How about that? It's the first icon for this property. Here's the floating properties. There's not too much to them. This is the float left button right here. And color is going to be color. Color is actually in text, remember? Color, hashtag 1E, 1E, 1E. Enter. Hey, they showed up. So this is just a regular kind of link styling when we want to create a normal kind of a horizontal bunch of links. So here we have normal horizontal links as opposed to at the narrower screens that's going to be replaced by that click on and drop off the menu. Navigation should appear like this. Your page will have a home link highlighted. This, the example here has a sites link highlighted. Your page will have a home link highlighted. And it does. How about that? There are 5 links to the navigation menu, so setting width of each to 20%, that's why we did that. Floating to the left spreads them out evenly. We have the maximum width property of 1,000. Step 5 prevents them from spilling all over the place. The float property is currently the most reliable way of aligning block level elements horizontally. Although links are normally block level, we displayed them to block in the global style that was created earlier, right? Now we're going to use absolute positioning to place text over an image. So we should save. Let's do some saving. Why not? Good. Part 5, we styled that paragraph of that orangey stuff. Remember, that was just below the image. For the 2-column layout, we're going to use absolute positioning to place it over the image and style it in a different color. And we'll learn something else about absolute positioning, which may have had to do with that extra credit stuff you probably didn't try last time in the regular class. We're down at the bottom of page 64. If necessary, switch to index. No, we are in the index already. And click the purple bar to set the window at 700. Okay, I clicked it there. It's 700 now. Good. Page 65. Number 2. If the ruler at the top of the page appears to be incorrectly set, close the document and reopen it. The JavaScript that controls the navigation menu on the screen less than 700 wide sometimes shifts the ruler. So apparently there's a little glitch there. Mine's fine. Anything that looks funny here, didn't respond quite right, I guess you could just close the page and reopen it. In live view, select the paragraph under the image of the Golden Gate Bridge. Let's go here. Come on, let me grab the scroll. There, it's just being a little balky, I guess. There it is. This paragraph right here. Okay, good. Make sure that the responsive CSS and the media query are still selected. Responsive, yes. Media query, yes. All is yes. Good. And we're going to make a selector for hashtag hero P, which is what that paragraph is. And in fact, when we go plus in the selectors, it will kind of make one, except we will get rid of the wrapper. Good. And we're going to do the following properties and values. And let's go ahead and do them with a 36%. So we're changing the size of this little paragraph, which has got the underline and stuff like that. I got to go to layout for width, right? You remembering this stuff? Layout width, 36%. I'll go to percent and put it in 36. And then padding top. We'll start with padding top of 20 pixels. So padding is nice to push text around a little bit so it's not touching the edge of things. And then padding, we're just going to go around, I guess. Padding left is 25. Padding right is 25. All right, and we're not doing any padding bottom. Yeah, I can see why we don't need that. But we're going to do a position of absolute. Okay, position of absolute. Remember, position of absolute by itself doesn't do anything except sort of take it out of the flow. That's why it's sort of sit on top of stuff now. That's why it kind of moved. That's explained in number 4. And number 5, use a visual tool immediately below the position property to move the paragraph into position over the image. Okay? Setting a positive value to do so on and so forth. So here we are. Top is going to be 90 pixels. PX of 90. And right, we'll do right, is going to be a position of 33 pixels. I could just type it in like this if I wish. Oops, I don't want capital pixels. Cap lock's still on. I can hit enter if I want. Make it take effect. So it moved it. Set the color property to white. So 90 and 33, is that right? Yes. Color to white and the border on all sides. So color is just plain old color and text, and that is going to be white. Okay. And border on all sides is 5 pixels wide and solid. Border is here. This is all sides, so that is the correct tab to be on. And it's going to be width is going to be in pixels, and it's going to be 5. And style is going to be, come on, solid. Okay, good. The paragraph should now be positioned over the Golden Gate Bridge, but it may not look quite like this, like it is on like it is on the next page. In other words, let's go ahead and save this all, and we'll run it. Remember, if you ever forgot to save and it asks you to, yes, please do it. File, preview in browser, Chrome. And you'll see that mine doesn't look quite like the one on the page either. If I make my page narrower, it might look a little bit more like it. Most people's initial reaction is that their absolute positioning element is moved. It hasn't. The offsets from the top and right are still exactly the same. The problem is This has to do with what is the containing block, right? It's nested inside the hero div. Is that the containing block? It isn't unless you tell it to be. And this little conundrum, which has to do with the containing blocks, which was discussed in class, is discussed a little more here. When there's no such element, the page becomes this containing block is relative to 36% is relative to the page rather than the hero div. Offsets are calculated from the top right of the page and so on. Fixing the problem is remarkably easy. We're going to create a new selector for hero, still in the media query, and set the position property to relative. That's the trick you need to do. So here we are. We're still in responsive, and we're still in the media query of 700, right? Good. We're going to make a new one. Oops, come on, pay attention. There it goes. For just hero. Good. Just hero. And we are going to set the position property to relative. So I'm going to hit enter twice. And we are going to go to layout and position property of relative. Boom. That changed it. And in fact, let's go ahead and save it and run it. Load files, preview in browser, and we're going to Chrome. And that is much better. And when the screen gets wider, it still stays properly positioned based on the photograph, right? So we did the fix, and we looked in the browser, and it worked, and we saved it. And now we're on page 67. Setting an element's position property relative, so on and so forth, explains sort of like why this works. And it talks about absolute positioning and can be a problem. But we don't want to we use it for something like this, just one thing you want to float on top of another, not float, position on top of another, but not an entire page. Now we're going to float one column alongside another. Earlier you used the float property. Yes, we did. Use the same property in it's the most reliable way of creating multi-column layouts. You've already seen that in class. So here we are on page 67 under float one column, number 1, with the responsive CSS and the media query still selected. Here we go. Responsive and the media query are still selected. Create a selector for main and set its width property to 60%. Okay, so a plus. And I'm just going to type main. Remember, this is not hashtag main. Main is the full name of the element itself. 2 enters will do it. I'm now creating styles for main. We're going to set the width property to 60%. Okay, that's in layout, and that's under width, and that's a percent, and that's 60. Good. Now we're going to do one for a side. And we're going to set the property value for the width now is going to be set for a side to 28%. These numbers will make a little more sense in a minute. Percent 28. Enter. Also set the left margin to 0. Left margin to 0 pixels, that's correct. I'll click off there. And it says this is necessary to override this 4% margin that is inherited from global styles. Yeah, that's something else that happens in these media queries. Some things inherit down through, so we have to kind of remove them here. And now we're on to page 68. The main element inherits the 4% margin on both sides of the global styles, and the side element still has a 4% margin on the right side. So the combined width of these two elements and their margins adds up to 100%. That's why we use those numbers. Still in the media query, yes we are, create a group selector for main and aside. So here we go. We're going to do main, comma, aside. If it's a comma, it means it's one and the other. It's not a descendant. Okay, main aside. Good. Set the following properties and values. Again, margins and floating. Margin top, 30 pixels. Oops, no, not 0. Put the 3 in there. Margin bottom, 30 pixels. Put a 3 in there. Float. Floating is down here. Float to the left. Both of those are going to float to the left, in other words. And the font size is going to get a little bit smaller in this case, I think. So we have to go to text for that. Font size is going to go to 0.875 EM. That's very specific. EMs, but not 0. It's going to be 0. Oh, sorry, screw that up. Not 0. It's going to be 0.875. I could have just done 0.875, but it would work the same way. Okay, that's better. As soon as you set the float property, it'll look as though disaster is struck because most of the background turns black. Did it really? Let's see. It did. Oh my gosh, what happened? This is perfectly normal. Well, I'm glad of that. On page 68, reading along, floated elements are removed from the main flow of the document in a similar way to absolutely positioned ones. What has happened is that the footer element has, guess what? It's a clear, right? The fix is easy. Number 6. Still in the media query, select this, create a selector for footer and set the clear property to left. We're still in responsive, media query, new footer. Remember, it's not a hashtag footer. The footer is just a real thing on its own. And we want to set the clear, which will be in layout, which will probably be down near floating. Yes, it is. We're going to set it to clear left. Did that change things? Yes, it did. Of course it did. Everything falls back into place. Setting the viewport, we are near the very end now, setting the viewport meta tag. Your responsive design is complete. It's just one final step before your masterpiece can be displayed correctly on mobile devices. And this is definitely more advanced stuff. In the HTML category of the Insert panel, select Viewport. It's the third one down. So here we go. In the Insert panel, we're going to select so under HTML still. It's in the third section. Whoa, here we go. Third section, and it's a viewport. There it is. And this adds a chunk of code, which we're only doing to this page. This is the only real page we're working on here. But if we had more pages, we want to do this with more. Without the viewport meta information, so we didn't have to tell it where to put this or anything. It knew to go put this in the head, and it's just a bunch of code that establishes the viewport. Without the viewport meta, most mobile phones automatically scale pages and ignore media queries. So that's what changes to say, don't just shrink the page down. I'll use the media queries and adjust the page. And then it says, congratulations, we've completed the tutorial. We should view in the browser, and then you would zip and so on. And you have a mock-up on the last page of the sketch, the picture, the image of what the page should roughly look like. Let's go ahead and save everything and run it. And here's my page. I have my my navigation at the top. I've got my links here. I've got my filter going, and I've got my Everything seems to be working pretty well. I do see a problem, and you may have this problem too, with the navigation where we're not getting the hover. More about that in just a minute. Let's see if we're getting the change in the page as we go to narrower. Still looks okay. Everything's adjusting to the width, right? But it's still multi-column. But then we go to a lot narrower. Boom. Now we've got, it goes to a one-column page, and we still got stuff working, and we click on this menu, which works, and those hovers are working, right? Good. And we'll make it back wider again, full screen, and that's how it looks like. Okay, and to wrap up, there is a tiny bit of instruction that is left off the tutorial. Some of you may have had this problem, some of you may not. This is where we get into the kind of, there's some little bit of art to CSS that different browsers, different order of instructions can make things go a little differently. Are you hovering over your navigation in the widescreen and nothing is happening? Not getting the hover? But what you want to happen is you want this, right? You want the hover to happen like that. Of course, this one always stays that way because it's this your hero effect. So how come you don't get the hover? Well, I'm afraid the tiny bit of instruction that I forgot to include, I actually did include it, but for some reason it didn't get printed in this copy. It says, menu problems. Are your menu items not clickable at a wider width? Add this code to the at media area out of the style sheet. It fixes the problem. You add header overflow hidden. I'll show you in the code directly. And this is probably easier if you just go, if you're in source code right now, if you're in split review right now, just go to code, go to responsive, so you're looking at the style sheet. And then in the at media section, and this would be a good moment to notice, the at media section is here. And by the way, we only added one at media statement. I know that the instructions talked about two of them. I forgot to change that because this was slightly simplified. Maybe you can imagine how more than one could be used for different, step down to a different size too, or in between sizes. However, we only used one at media. And you'll see how it works too, right? Everything else we did is all first, and then it says at media, and it does have a curly bracket. This is the only time, at media statements are the only time where you have a curly bracket around a curly bracket. So you put this curly bracket actually goes around everything, and it ends way down here. Okay, so it is a regular, it's at media, in parentheses, the description, the measurement, and then the curly bracket, and then we have a bunch more rules. So these things only apply to that statement. And here's what you add. Just type in header, curly bracket, overflow, colon, hidden, semicolon, and end the curly bracket. And that, when you run it, it should then give you this. So you get that. Okay, and the last thing to say is, thanks for sticking with me to the end of this exercise. On page 69, you'll notice that there's a note here that says here are a few things I might ask you on the final exam, and make sure there's not an updated version of that here, which was there. Okay, here are a few things I might ask you on the final exam. What is Dreamweaver site definition, and what advantages does it offer? Do you remember? Site definition organizes your files and folders, keeps track of the names of things and the paths. What did you have to do to make a position? Why did you have to make a position relative rule for the hero div before you could properly position the photo? Do you remember that? We just did that actually. That was making that div be the containing block, so the absolute positioning will relate to the containing block and not the entire page. What does z-index do? Well, z-index does layering. It's setting different layer levels. So when we give something a z-index, it pushes it on top of the things. What does a media query do? You should know that now. It sets a minimum or a maximum width, at which time some additional CSS takes effect. And what can you do with CSS filters? Well, what you did is, one of the many things you can do with CSS filters is you change something from grayscale back to full color. And those are possible things that are beyond the other tests and so on that could be on the final exam. Thanks a lot. See you later.